With the first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select
Trophy Chase, Arizona.
With the second pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select
Cody Smith, Houston, Texas. The fantasy draft room is now on the clock.
Welcome to the Fantasy Draft Room. I am Chase, and with me, as always, my man Cody. What do we got in store for the people today?
We are continuing our free agent and cut candidates. Typically, we've been doing trade candidates as well, but I can't find any that make sense for me at the tight end position because that's the one that we're covering today. So we're just going to talk about the free agents and cuts. If y'all think there's any trade candidates, definitely drop them below, but I couldn't find any off the top of my head. So we're going to get into all the guys that are free agents. It's a good free agent tight end class. There's a lot of guys here, and there's a lot of cut candidates that are going to impact us for fantasy football means as well. So we can roll into this thing. Look at our free agents first as we kick this thing off.
All right. Yeah. Part 3 of 4 tight end. Now, while there's not a plethora of them, there are some very good tight ends available, some that are going to be fantasy relevant as well. And I'm going to start off with the man on the left there, Dalton Schultz. He had a very good year 2 years ago where he really broke out. Everyone saw him thrive, thought this year was going to be the same. He did produce when he was on the field this year for fantasy and for the Cowboys, but he did have some injuries throughout the season that kind of hampered him. Actually, probably impacted his free agent, value, in my opinion. He could be back in Dallas, but there are a lot of free agent, teams to be that would probably be interested in a pass catching weapon like Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, they definitely could be, and especially with what you're going to have to pay a guy like Dalton Schultz, who can be a pass-catching weapon, compared to a guy like in the wide receiver video that we just broke down. You're going to pay Jacoby Myers like $17 million, like a Christian Kirk contract, or you could pay Dalton Schultz like $11 million a year, and he's probably going to be pretty happy with that deal. So there's a large disparity in the market, and for a lot of these guys that are able or are well-able pass catchers, a lot of these guys could find a home and could be a pretty integral part of their offense.
Yeah, Dalton Schultz, it doesn't seem like Miami would be a good fit for him because Miami's obviously getting rid of another, guy, as you see here in Mike Gesicki. It doesn't seem like they're going to bring him back. They did not use him at all. So, maybe Dalton Schultz isn't going to be the best fit there. But Jacksonville has an opening. There's a lot of really good teams that do have openings. People talk about the Chargers. I just don't see, Chargers are in cap hell right now. They are going to make some cuts to get under, but I don't see them cutting a bunch of guys just to sign another tight end and pay one. So we'll kind of see what happens with Dalton Schultz. Any landing spots stick out for you where you're like, oh, I'd love to see him if he did leave Dallas?
Yeah, as we were talking through this one beforehand, I kind of saved this one, and I like him staying in Texas, man. My Houston Texans are in desperate need of a tight end, and a tight end that's the quality of level of Dalton Schultz could be a large boost for a rookie QB that we assume that the Texans are going to draft this year. We've got the cap room, or the Texans do, and so I think that Dalton Schultz could be a really good fit in this offense and still probably produce at a pretty high clip for fantasy football teams as well. I'd be pretty excited to see him stay here in Texas and move down the road to Houston.
Yeah, great one. We did talk about the Texans. I do think that the Texans will be in the market for a free agent tight end. And I brought up Gesicki here as well. He was franchise tagged just like Dalton Schultz was this past season, and he played on the 1-year deal, and Miami just did not use him. They just didn't. And I think they did it because he was going to be cheap, 1-year rental, not a big blocker, but we've seen him make incredible catches. And when he is utilized, he's a very good pass catcher. Dallas potentially could be a landing spot. It just, I guess if they're not going to pay Dalton Schultz, maybe they're not going to pay another big name like an Evan Ingram or a Mike Gesicki. But yeah, Gesicki could be a good landing spot there in Houston. What are your thoughts on Gesicki as a whole? Has the fantasy community soured on him? Have you soured on him?
No, I've actually been acquiring a couple of Mike Gesicki shares this offseason. I do think he's going to be leaving the Miami Dolphins. Like you said, they just did not use him. But I did also joke earlier today whenever we were talking about him in the voice chat earlier, like, wouldn't it just make absolutely no sense, but also the perfect sense at the same time, where they just like still don't use him, but they just give him like a 3-year contract for no reason, just to keep him in the offense and be that, 30% on the field snap usage guy. Make no sense. It would drive fantasy football minds crazy, but it just feels like an NFL thing that would happen just to piss us off. But no, Mike Gesicki, he unfortunately did lose his helmet rights in this graphic because he does have the worst gritty in the league. But I do love him as a fantasy football player because you're right. He is athletic and he does make some incredible catches. So I could see him being a guy that can maybe go to a Green Bay situation. A lot of these guys that we're going to be talking about, it does feel like they're just going to play musical chairs. So if you're just saying like, oh no, they're going to bring back that guy, I don't think any of these guys have a locked in shot. Even Evan Ingram, who was smashing last year with Trevor Lawrence in that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. I don't think any of these guys have a locked in chance to be back with the same team. So a lot of them, I think, are just going to kind of move around and circle around to the same teams that they left.
The one that we didn't mention, but Carolina, they do have Tommy Tremble and they have Ian Thomas still, but they're really nothing. They don't really have any of the pass catching threats. Terrace Marshall isn't it? Maybe bringing in a free agent tight end of Dalton Schultz or Mike Gesicki, or even the next guy we'll jump into here of Evan Ingram. Just having another threat in the passing game would be something fun for that offense and for that team as a whole. So we'll see. Again, situation to monitor. I have definitely not soured on him at all. I hope he does go to a situation where he is going to get 120 targets or 110 targets in a season so that we can kind of see what his potential could be. Evan Ingram, man, broke out as a rookie, went away. He played with Eli, rough situation in New York, signs a contract with the Doug Peterson friendly Jacksonville Jaguars, and all of these guys would be great fits with Jacksonville. So let's not forget that one. What do you think happens with Evan Ingram here?
He's the one. I know I just said that none of these guys are locks to go back to the team they came from and be re-signed or be tagged or anything like that. He's the one that I think has the highest chance to return to his team. Actually, there was I saw on Twitter earlier today, their Jacksonville Jaguars put out a graphic, or somebody put out a graphic that had Evan Ingram on it, and he actually responded to it and said, damn, I thought this was the news. So it looks like he's thinking he's going to be back with the team. And I think it makes the most sense for this team. Him and Trevor Lawrence absolutely developed a connection last year that I think would be ill-advised to take away from those two. I think they both work really well together, and I do think they keep it rolling there. But if they don't, for some reason, they can't work out the contract, he's going to be a highly sought-after asset in the free agent market.
Yeah, we've never doubted his ability and his athleticism. It's been a great resurgence for him to play with an actual quarterback. They're going to bring in Calvin Ridley this offseason, I guess after post-suspension. So he's going to be out there. I love it. Like I love the fact that he wants to be there. Doug Peterson, seemed to like him in that offense. Him and Trevor Lawrence had the connection, and it seems like it's going to happen, right? Like with the news like that, when Evan Ingram is saying something like that on a tweet, even though it's obviously in a joking fashion, there must be some indication of confidence that the organization is connected with his agent and they're close to figuring something out when that time comes. So. Yeah, man, I think he could resign. Otherwise, he will be a very sought-after free agent. He's going to be sought after, but Hayden Hurst here, yeah, not as much. Hayden Hurst played well, fit his role in that offense. Do you think there's going to be anything fantasy relevant? Do you think he returns to the Bengals? For fantasy-wise, I'm not super excited unless it's in best ball.
Yeah, there's a chance for any of these tight ends to just go to the spot. I mean, Hurst, fills a Dalton Schultz role in Dallas for some reason and, turns into a very fantasy relevant tight end. And obviously with all of these tight ends, it's going to matter a whole hell of a lot depending on what your league format is, because if you're not playing in, 1.5, you start to care a little bit, but once you start getting into the 1.75 premiums, 2.0 premiums or the two tight end leagues, then you're really, really concerned about where these guys do go and where they do land, because it's going to make a big impact to your fantasy team. I mean, Hurst is just one of these guys that's going to be, he's he's in the free agent class. He's going to get probably a nice size contract, and he's going to be an integral part of an offense. It just depends on what offense he lands on and how much of a factor he is for fantasy football. And just before we do get off of him, I always forget how cool this man looks. Like, he had to make the graphic whenever I looked up a picture of Hayden Hurst again. Like, this man is an absolute Viking warrior who is perfect for the tight end position.
He's a monster. Yeah. Yeah, fantasy wise, I don't know, if he's ever going to be a huge target hog or anything like that, but he will have his games. They'll use him, effectively and efficiently. But yeah, I think it's going to be more of a dart situation. So jump into the cut candidates here.
Let's run through some honorable mentions in the free agent market, because there are some guys that I didn't put on this graphic that are actually still very fantasy relevant. Starting off with a guy who, we've had a lot of hope for that hasn't really come to fruition. Irv Smith Jr. is a free agent. As Hawkinson was brought in, Irv Smith leaves and gets to find a new team and a new home, and hopefully realize that potential that we've all seen in Irv Smith. There's also Robert Tonyan, Foster Moreau, Jordan Akins, not Tyler Kroft. He just gets his quarterbacks killed.
Austin Hooper, I think, is as well.
Austin Hooper would be probably the last one of this list that really means anything for fantasy, even in those, high point per target formats or point per reception formats.
Yeah, I think those are the only ones worth mentioning. Again, could end up anywhere. Could end up in a situation with another tight end already in place. So just some things to monitor and kind of keep an eye on as the offseason unfolds. So let's check out our cut candidates. And starting off in Washington, Logan Thomas, when he's been healthy, he's played really, really well. The problem has been health. No other way around it. $8 million dead cap, save $5 million if they do cut him. It seems like it would be a good candidate to get rid of if they're going to draft one. I think John Bates is still there. Haven't seen a whole lot out of him that excites us. I don't know if they're really going to be in the market to bring one in or draft one. So it's a bottom line. They save money, right?
Yep.
Save money here.
There's going to be cuts everywhere that you don't expect all the way across the league on every team. Guys who, even just for a couple $1 million, just to free up some cap space for the draft picks that are going to be coming in. They're not in the worst cap position right now. The Commanders, they're actually under the salary cap by 1.4 million, but they will probably still need to clear some more for the NFL draft and the draft picks that they do have. But he just hasn't been healthy. And, we've had some the long shot dart throws of John Bates haven't ever come to fruition in the tight end room. So I think they need something there to be a guy for them. And Eric Bieniemy is now the offensive coordinator for this offense. Yeah. And so if you want, nobody is going to become Travis Kelce, whoever steps into this role, but whoever does is going to get some buzz because of that connection, that correlation. So whoever does go to this role, I don't know whether it's through the draft or through free agency, but I do think they need to bring somebody in, and whoever it is will become fantasy relevant as soon as they do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that's overlooked, is the fact that Eric Bieniemy is going there. We'll see, again, what cap space they can clear out but over the next couple of weeks here. And if they can clear out enough, maybe they do bring in one of the free agents we just talked about. Again, would be a great landing spot for any of these guys. Just because there is going to be opportunity in that offense. But monitor the situation, see what tight end gets either drafted, brought in, or if it is Logan Thomas, maybe there's going to be some interest in Logan Thomas if he does decide, if they don't decide to cut him. But let's jump over here to another guy. We had some conversation. We have Hunter Henry here from the New England Patriots. Save $10 million if they cut him. We talked about Jonnu Smith earlier today. Someone mentioned that he could be cut, and we looked at his dead cap, and it's like he basically, they lose money. It's like he's
negative $2 million if they cut him.
He ain't going nowhere this year. He's going to make every bit of that 17 million, and he's going to have that 19 mil dead cap. So at least this year, Jonnu is going to be there, but Hunter Henry may not be if they're looking to clear some space.
Yeah, he could be a guy that's definitely a cap casualty. Luckily for the Patriots, they are already like $30 million under the cap. So, it's a large amount to save here, though. $10.5 million is nothing to sneeze at if they want to go out and actually buy, or, in free agency, get a wide receiver. The wide receiver class is not great in free agency, but maybe they can trade for somebody and bring somebody in on a high contract and, get some of that money in place, put some of this money into, I like Hunter Henry as a part of an offense, but he's not a guy that's going to be an elevator of his quarterback or anything like that. And I don't think they've used Jonnu to his potential because they brought in both of these guys at the same time. So I think they'd be fine with rolling out Jonnu. I think they'd probably bring in somebody else too, but whoever they do bring in isn't going to cost anything more than $10.5 million. So I do really think Hunter Henry could be a surprise cap casualty to a lot of people here in the next couple of weeks.
And a lot of people liked Hunter Henry. I don't say they loved him, but there was always the hope that he could develop when he was with the Chargers, went to New England. I think he had, 1 touchdown season there where people were, excited, but the yards just haven't been there. Jonnu's there now as well. And that offense has been just a hot mess. Maybe Bill O'Brien does change things for them, and not having a defensive coordinator run their offense might help. So if he does stick around, great. I think there would be some people interested if he does get cut, seeing where he would end up, because I think his new team, wouldn't have to pay him as much as some of these free agents. And to top it off, like, he is a very good tight end, NFL tight end. He run blocks very well, and he is a good pass catcher when utilized correctly. So I think Hunter Henry might be a fun one to kind of keep an eye on here.
Yeah, even if he does get cut, still very interested to see where he would go. I mean, there's always the chance that he just becomes a part of a free tight end role, but he could also be the number one somewhere with all of these guys that are hitting free agency, the guys that are possible cut candidates. He could fill the spot of any of them and still stay at least fantasy relevant.
Lots of teams do need tight end. I think that's the big thing. Lots of teams need tight end, or they have, a tight end that specializes in one area or another. So let's move on here to Gerald Everett. Definitely is a potential cut candidate because the Chargers are in cap hell and they have a quarterback to re-sign. They're going to be making some moves this offseason to make some cuts. Gerald Everett is a candidate, saving $4 million against the cap. So, it is still saving $4 million. A lot of people have said that this would be a good free agency landing spot, as I mentioned earlier, and I just don't see another free agent going there. If they do cut Gerald Everett, I could see them drafting one though. And there's some very good tight ends in this draft class that would be a fun landing spot in LA.
Yeah, I mean, obviously being paired with Justin Herbert, you're going to have high hopes for whatever tight end lands here. And at stretches, Gerald Everett was even useful. I think people do look at his production. They don't think he probably reached his, ceiling that he possibly could have been in this offense. And I think that's why you're looking at it. Like if you could save $4 million against the cap, cut Gerald Everett, you bring somebody else in, it starts to make sense. But I do agree with you that if you're trying to do this move only for cap savings, it doesn't really make much sense to go out and sign like Dalton Schultz to a $12 million deal. I just don't think that's probably the way that this one would work out. So I could see Gerald Everett still sticking around if they do find other cap casualties elsewhere along the roster. It's interesting that this is probably one of the most ones that we've heard about at the tight end position as a cap casualty amongst like fantasy circles and NFL circles. I can see him staying, but I do think eventually he probably is a cap casualty because they do have to pay, Justin Herbert his new contract. They are, where are we at, negative $22 million against the cap right now, so they're going to have to clean house somewhere. So even saving $4 million is a nice piece to that puzzle that they've got to figure out from the GM spot. So I don't think Gerald Everett stays, but I do agree with you that it's probably more of a, maybe a Luke Musgrave, a Dalton Kincaid, a Michael Mayer that ends up filling this role here for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, we went through some of the Chargers cuts, and I think there's 3 players they can cut, a couple on defense, and then Keenan Allen that would save them $50 million and get them in a much better spot. I could see Gerald Everett very well being with this team just because, again, free agency wise, you're not going to be bringing in a tight end for much cheaper than that. So they would have to draft someone, which is a very real possibility. But if Gerald Everett does get cut, does he interest you at all anywhere else for fantasy, or is it kind of a, he's a toss up at that point?
Man, it's hard to say, man, because he's already in one of the best spots. Like, this is the spot that we want everybody else to go to, and he really didn't produce all that well in this spot. So I don't see him being more than just a piece of any other offense anywhere. He's not going to, probably be like a 80, 90, 100 target guy wherever he does go. So I mean, he's going to be a piece that you want if you're in those 2.0 tight end premium leagues, 1.75. He's going to be a piece. He's going to be usable. Best ball lineups. He's going to hit your lineups probably a couple weeks wherever he does go. I just don't see much of a ceiling upside for Gerald Everett anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he got 87 targets this year, and I believe that was in 16 games. He did have some good weeks where I think people were excited about his potential, and then he disappeared at times. So,
and this is with all the injuries that they sustained at the wide
Yes.
receiver position as well. He was basically a wide receiver for them for multiple parts of the season whenever they had Keenan Allen out and Mike Williams out. So, like that 80 targets is, I think, his ceiling wherever he does end up going.
Yep, I'm with you there. All right, let's move on here to our last cut candidate, one Tyler Higbee. And so this would be another fun landing spot because of how the Rams use a tight end if he does get cut. So be on the kind of lookout for what they might do. But they would save $4 million against the cap here in 2023, $9 million cap hit if they did decide to keep him. And I'm pretty sure the Rams are in cap hell as well. Like they're in a real rough spot.
They're not in actually ultimate hell. I'll find them here as we go through. I'm actually missing them on this list. My eyes are going over them.
That's all right.
Oh no, here we go. We are negative 16 million against the cap. So they're gonna have to find some. They're gonna have to find some cut candidates somewhere. This is probably the one that the least of all of these cut candidates that I think is going to happen. You're saving $4 million, and I guess it's probably saving almost just as much as Gerald Everett would be saving against the cap for them. But he is carrying the $1 million dead cap that they've already pushed out into 24, 25, and 26, as I put down here at the bottom. He was a very integral part of this offense last year whenever they couldn't rely on, I'm forgetting his name, the guy that they brought in, but Cooper Kupp went out for multiple stretches, or for the long stretch of the year. B-Rob, goodness, that I just try to forget that I was ever fully in on him and almost sending like top end seconds, back end first for B-Rob. That just
A-Rob, but yeah, same guy.
A-Rob, goodness, I still can't do
it's
it.
Late.
Replace him with another guy. No, Tyler Higbee. I do think he ends up staying, but he'd be an interesting cut candidate, a surprise cut candidate to most people as well. But he's a good tight end. As much as I think he has brick hands and can't catch the ball all that well, he catches touchdowns and he can run over the middle and he's an integral part of this Rams offense that we saw last year. So if he was to go anywhere else, I'd be excited wherever that would be.
Yeah, I mean, he was PPR tight end 6, so just in regular PPR tight end scoring. And he had 100 and some targets here, 108 targets, 72 receptions. Like they did utilize him. He had some really big games as well this year where you're like, holy crap, Tyler Higbee just got me 9 catches. And if you are in a premium where you're playing either 1.5, 1.75, 2.0, like he smashed for you at times this year, but he also disappeared. I know he was banged up. I mean, that whole team was in a really shitty situation.
Yep.
Cooper Kupp got hurt. A-Rob was non-existent. I mean, Stafford was out for a chunk of the year, and he was hurt going into the season and talking about his elbow and shoulder issues. So I do think that if they kept him, like Higbee might be a sneaky best ball buy. Like he might actually be a fun one to get on your team. If he left, would you be interested in him, or are you more interested in him on the Rams?
I think that it'd be about, he did get all of the targets last year because of the devoidness of weapons that was on this offense last year. He just had to step up and be an integral part of the team. I'd still be interested in him. I do think this is one of his better landing spots. He probably takes a little bit of a step down. He probably goes more into that, the 12 to 16 range. I think that's even where we're valuing him at now, even though he's in he produced as a top tier tight end last year just because of the position is awful and it changes year over year. But he's kind of in that mix of guys of just, we'll see. And if he becomes a part of an offense, I'd still be in on him. And I kind of do agree. Like if you can just send out like thirds for him and like a best ball format and pick yourself up some Tyler Higbee, he's going to be a very large part of this offense if he stays. And I think he's going to at least be decently fantasy relevant, even if he goes elsewhere, because he produced last year and he's going to deserve a contract of some sort. Probably not a 4x29, but something probably along the ranges of that still.
Yeah, and again, with a lot of good landing spots out there, would be fun to see him on the free agent market. I do think that with the way that they want to use him in LA, it's probably best for his fantasy, value to stick around there, because even 2 years ago they did use him in the offense pretty well. That was the Cup monster year, but they did at least utilize him in a similar fashion at least 2 years ago. So we'll see about some of these. Again, cut candidates, they are only saving $4 million, but when you're in cap hell, you're going to see some surprises. Like it's going to happen. It happens every offseason. Someone's going to become a free agent that you just did not expect.
Yep. It's just the nature of the game. People got to find it somewhere, and a couple of these guys are just going to lose jobs. They're going to have to find new homes. But for a lot of these guys, a lot of these tight ends, they're all just in kind of that we'll wait and see if they produce range, see where they land. And some of these guys are going to go into smash spots, and they're probably still not going to produce because it's the tight end position. So don't get your hopes up too high whenever that tight end does go to the Washington Commanders to pair up with Eric Bieniemy. So just putting that one out there right now.
Not Travis Kelce.
It will never be Travis Kelce.
No. All right. Any last things you want to touch on before we wrap out?
No, I'll throw out some other names that aren't sexy at all, but they're names that are probably going to be cut candidates or could be cut candidates as well. Adam Troutman, the hopes and dreams of Adam Troutman, is a $2.9 million cap hit and only has $200,000 dead cap. So I don't think there's any way stocks up for Jonnu Smith. And then we also have Mo Alley Cox, the gigantor there in the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts. He is a $5.3 million cap hit, and they can save about half of that with a 2.4 dead cap. They've drafted like 7 tight ends over the last 3 years, and they still have Mo Alley Cox. So I just don't see why they wouldn't cut him and take a little bit of savings to give some work to Jelani Woods and Ogletree. So I think Mo Alley Cox could be on the market as well, and he's a name that a bunch of fantasy people love, so want to monitor throughout the offseason as well.
Yeah, it could open things up, like you said, for Jelani, so that would be fun as well. So, again, please like and subscribe. Let us know any other trade candidates that you might think of, or cuts and free agent landing spots that would be fun for some of these guys. Thank you again for joining us here in the Fantasy Draft Room.